A Superman action figure in a toy coffin, a blue shirt and red jacket, a first flight in the sun above the Arctic tundra. These are some of the moments that define my Superman fandom. Together on this podcast, we journey across time and media to examine, discover, and reconsider the creative visions that have shaped the Man of Steel. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to reconsider the 1997 Steel movie starring Shaquille O'Neal is returning guest, comic book artist V Ken Marion. Welcome back.
Yo, thanks for having me back. I am so psyched to talk about Steel, one of my absolute favorite characters from my childhood and now. And yeah, dude, this is going to be great. Can't wait.
I remember we did a panel. I moderated. You and comic book writer Brandon Montclair were guests on this panel at Undiscovered Realm Comic-Con a couple of years ago in White Plains, New York. And I remember that might have been the first time, or definitely one of the first times, that I got a sense of your deep fandom for the character of Steel, because I think it was actually an audience question. Someone might have asked, like, who's a character you would love to do a run on or something like that. And you came up with Steel, and I was like, oh, like I just wasn't something that I would have, automatically assumed. So I take it then you have been a Steel fan for some time.
I would be shocked if there's another comic book artist out there that cares about Steel as much as I do. Like that would absolutely shock me. Now, there's definitely artists and writers out there who know more about him factually, like in terms of like the chronology of like, what happened in his books and stuff. But to find one who actually cares about the character as much as me would like absolutely shock me. Like he is one of my favorites from when I was a kid. And yeah, it's a character I always thought was super cool. And yeah, man, like in no small part, thanks to, the action figures and this movie that we're about to talk about. So yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that. And I do want to get even more of a sense of your Steel fandom. It's a fandom I share. I mean, I think your fandom surpasses mine, but I honestly, especially after Superman and Lois, which I don't think you're caught up on, and maybe some of our audience isn't as well. So I won't spoil anything, but I think at this point, it's at least safe to say that Steel plays a role. And through that show in particular, my fandom for the character really has deepened. And it's so fitting that we're doing this episode now, right on the heels of the Crisis Till Death event that I did, because we just talked about Reign of the Supermen and the introduction of Steel. And so I think it's perfect now to have this conversation. Now, people who listened to the last episode might remember that I said you were coming back on the show and we were going to do this deep dive into the visual evolution and style of Superman. And in fact, the Steel discussion was going to be a Patreon bonus episode. So what happened behind the scenes was that you and I think separately both got really excited about talking about Steel after we each did our rewatch of the movie. And through our texts and everything, we both kind of came to the same conclusion that, we'll touch on the visual evolution of the character, but maybe we'll save that for a fuller discussion down the line. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were just really excited to talk about Steel.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. And not only did we watch the movie, but I read issue number 1. Did you read issue 1 too?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because we'll get into it in the show, but there's a lot of good comparisons, I think, between that first issue of what year was that? 1994?
Yeah.
The 1994 series Steel. Yeah. Which is like the best Steel series there is. I don't know if there ever was another one, but yeah, it's only 99 cents on Comixology. So if you guys like what you hear us talking about it, you should go to check it out, and maybe you'll become a giant fan like I am. So, and like Anthony is, he's, like I said, not as big a fan, but definitely I can see it in your eye that you're like, you're digging the character, which I'm happy about.
I am. It's for me as on this Superman fan journey, like Steel is definitely kind of having a moment within my fandom, because again, from Superman and Lois to the reread of Reign of the Supermen to the rewatch of the Steel movie and reading Steel #1, I'm all about Steel. So we have a lot to get into, but again, as promised, while I have you, I would love to talk a bit about the visual evolution of Superman. And this was actually an idea that you had originally proposed to do an episode on. So, I mean, let me turn it over to you first. I mean, when I guess what initially made you want to have a discussion on this? Like, what is it about the visual evolution of Superman that you find interesting?
Well, I guess it was like I started thinking about this maybe probably 10 years ago when like the new 52 happened and like they got rid of the underwear and gave him the collar, and like and at the time, I remember a lot of fans like it being very divisive. Like some people like loved it, and some people like absolutely hated it. There didn't really seem to be anybody in the middle. And like at the time, I thought it was kind of like while radical, like he still looked like Superman to me. Like it was like no one's not going to mistake him for not being Superman, you know. And like I tried to like take a step back from it, and like your average person on the street like probably wouldn't even notice the difference between like the old costume and the new 52 costume. You know what I mean? Like so it got me thinking about how like Superman like never really had drastic costume changes that were like permanent, right? Like if you look at I don't know, like any Avengers character or like the Fantastic Four have had multiple iconic costumes. Like Wolverine has multiple iconic costumes. Superman never really had that like to that extent, but I still feel like he like visually changed so much from decade to decade. Like how he was drawn, like how his face was drawn, how his physique was drawn, how like just how the stories themselves were drawn in terms of like the 60s stories were very almost whimsical, you know what I mean? Or not the 60s, the 50s, like from like between the 40s and before like the Marvel explosion happened when they were like very crazy, like when he'd get like lions heads and stuff like that, you know. So it's I think the visual evolution of the character is very interesting in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. That is true. Again, fans, no matter what fandom we're talking about, I mean, fans do take a lot seriously when it comes to characters and stories that they're passionate about, and all of us have certain things that fall into that category for us. But
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely,
but
absolutely.
that is a great point with Superman, where it's like even a small change, really can elicit a strong reaction. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, look, the one easy example would be the red trunks. I mean, that was like
Hmm.
such a big deal. But to your point, like especially with the new 52 costume, it's like you said, it's like no one would mistake that for a different character. Like it's still very clearly Superman, but it had the
Hmm.
collar and it didn't have the red trunks, and it's like, yeah, these subtle changes. And even I was thinking about this too in terms of just this evolution. It's like, and the style generally too, where the S logo, that shield, it's like you can tell, like so many artists have put their stamp on it, and you can look at so many different versions of the S and be like, oh, like that's the Jim Lee S, or that, yet
Hmm.
it still has the same basic elements. And I mean, I guess you could say, yes, that's art generally, and I'm sure you could say that about a lot of other characters, but I feel like especially with Superman, again, like a lot of artists have made their mark with slight variations on the same basic elements. Like it is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, like especially talking about the symbol, like even when they're tweaked, right? Like in the new 52, he didn't have the bump on it. It was just kind of the S didn't have the bump on the bottom. It was just kind of like flat and angled. Like it still looked like the Superman S, or like the Alex Ross one where it's like the Kingdom Come, where it's just like almost like a stripe. Like you can still like even though it's black, like the black instead of yellow, and even though there, you don't really see like a huge S shape, it's like the combo of like the shape, like the diamond shape with the red, like it works. You know what I mean? And like if you see someone wearing that shirt, like even if you don't read comics, like you still understand that as a Superman shirt, you know, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's something so elemental about it that, yeah, even when you boil it down to, like you said, with Kingdom Come, like that straight line, like it still
Yeah.
conveys the meaning. I mean, there's so much power behind it, and of course that goes hand in hand with the history that we've been with this
Hmm.
character and the symbol for so long. I'm glad we are having this discussion. I'm glad we're having it now because as you and audience knows, I mean, I spent many past episodes on this podcast going through pre-crisis Superman, right? We did episodes on the golden, silver, and bronze ages, and then more recently, right, coming off this big run of episodes looking at the period from 86 to 93 post-crisis. And then again, most modern Superman I have already read and will continue to revisit on the podcast. But so I feel like now I do have kind of a good sense of the evolution that the character has gone through. And I guess the question that I would pose to you, and we were talking about this a little bit off mic before, is, and again, I know you can say this for other characters too, but particularly with Superman, who's meant to represent the best of us. It's like,
Hmm.
how have you noticed the character of, or how has the evolution sort of reflected, changing, I guess changing ideas about, the ideal physique or things like that? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I we were saying off mic that I think like Superman, like it's interesting because if you look at the way he's drawn, like he kind of represents what at the time what culture deemed as like the ideal human being, you know what I mean, in like weird ways. So and I don't know if that's so much like artists trying to make him look like actors or whatever of the day, you know, like it might be a little bit of that, or it might be, but like I feel like the original 1940s Superman, who looked a lot like my grandpa actually, which is hilarious. Like the face looked a lot like my grandpa, but he looked very much like a trying to think. I don't really know like Hollywood actors from the 40s, but you know what I mean, like a black and white, like
Mm-hmm.
the slicked back hair, you know, like he looked very much like a tough like 1940s like Hollywood star, right? Or like a boxer or something from that era. You know what I mean? Like he very much had that like he was like heavy, and like he looked like just solid. Like he looked like a very like, you know, like strong, like I think he looked more like a boxer than anything, the original one. But like as it changes, like in the 80s, like with John Byrne, sorry, mental fart there. With John Byrne, like he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like he's like just jacked and like ripped out of his mind and stuff, you know. And then like in the like I feel like in the New 52 they made him like a little slimmer and like not as like buff. Like he was more like lean, and like he didn't have the slicked back hair anymore. It was just kind of like messy and stuff. Like so like I feel like it and I also think that's really important that he changes with time. I really like in the 90s when he had the long hair, because like it reflected what was cool in the 90s, right? And like I know there's some artists who try to make Superman look like throwbacky almost to the 1940s, and I've always thought that was kind of weird, because like when Superman was created, they didn't draw him looking like someone from like the Revolutionary War or something. You know what I mean? Like they didn't try to make him look like Robin Hood or something. Like something that would have been like the idea of like what a hero was, or like a King Arthur or something like that. I feel like that'd be the closest to like the era of the 40s of like what a superhero would be. And like his moniker's always been the Man of Tomorrow. So I always find it weird. Like, and I feel like in the last like 15 years, there's artists who try to draw him as though it's like the 40s or the 50s. And like, I've just always found that so strange, because it's like because like I feel like you can still be like a noble, good person without invoking the 50s. You know what I mean? Like, and like I feel like it's sometimes with writers and artists gets conflated that like, oh, it was a simpler time, it was a better time. It's like it really wasn't. There was always like turmoil like in the world. You know what I mean? Like our ideas of it are that it was squeaky clean because of like shows like Leave It to Beaver and stuff, but that wasn't real life. You know what I mean? So like the idea that to be like this like pure noble character, but like to try to make him almost like a throwback, like I've never jived with that. That's why I always like when they push him forward and change what he looks like, and like make him more current and modern, you know. So yeah, and like the new thing with Superman now, where he's like a dad and stuff, like I think that's still really cool, like because you can still make him current and modern and still be a dad. Like I don't think that necessarily ages him. I think it's like as long as you don't write him like stodgy, right? As long as you make him like a cool dad, like it still works, you know. So like the Superman and Lois show, I think is great. Like I haven't, I'm not all caught up with it yet. Like you said before, like I think I'm only on episode. I think I watched up to episode 6, and then Laura started to want to watch it with me, so we started over from the beginning. So I think me and her finished the first 3. So, but yeah, he's great in that. Like I feel like he's so relatable and like fun and cool, but also like echoes a little bit of like the Christopher Reeve version of Clark Kent, but like not to that like level, you know. Like I think he's like a good blend of all of it, you know. It's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with so much of what you said, and kind of working backwards. Yeah, I'm totally with you on Superman and Lois, and the idea of Clark as a dad, and but still as a fun dad, and you know, as a young father myself, and I like to think I'm also a cool dad. It's like I don't. It's funny. I mean, and I don't know. Maybe other people in my
You
life
are
would,
a cool dad. You're a cool dad.
thanks.
You're a cool dad.
But it's like I don't feel like fatherhood has aged me. I still feel like it's funny. I think about this sometimes. Like I still don't. Not that I don't feel like an adult, but I mean, like, I think in my head, I still feel like I'm 19 or 20.
Oh, dude,
know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like I'm 34. So,
yeah.
You know, so yeah, I agree. And that's the same thing too. I mean, not to take us too far afield, but like, I never jumping over to Marvel with the Spider-Man marriage, or honestly, even at DC with Superman and Lois, I never got this idea of like, oh, once they're married, they just seem so old. It's like, well, if you write them that way, then they'll feel that way. But,
Mm-hmm.
you can still be young and vibrant, in a marriage
Mm-hmm.
or in a committed relationship or as a parent. So, no, I'm totally with you. And then, to the larger point, yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like, yes, there's a lot to be said for the continuity and the tradition of the character, but it's like at the end of the day, I think the reason the character has endured for over 80 years and will continue to endure is that ability to reflect the
The
times.
time, yeah, yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
yeah.
like it's so much of. I feel like what culture associates with Superman is the Richard Donner movie, right? But like that movie, I feel like was kind of like really different from like what was going on in the comics at the time, right? Like it
Hmm.
was like wildly different, but like, but it was very like of the time. It felt very modern. Like if you saw that in the '70s, like they weren't trying to make him look like he was from the '50s. You know what I mean? Like that was like a '79 movie or whatever year, '78, '79, whatever year it came out. That was very much of that era, and it still maintained the Americana and the wholesomeness and like all the iconography, like, but they made it very like contemporary to that time period. And like I'm not sure when that kind of stopped, because like I feel like I've been listening to your episodes from the '90s, and I feel like in the '90s it was still very much like this. It felt like it was current to the '90s, you know. So I'm trying to think. Like I feel like probably in the 2000s, like mid 2000s, when that kind of started like the throwback kind of stuff started becoming more and more present. But I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know exactly where to pinpoint, but we haven't done a full discussion of the Jeff Johns Superman run yet, and we will on the podcast. And we'll also talk about the Richard Donner Superman movie, the first one. That's all coming next year. And I have a lot of thoughts that have been marinating, and we'll get into all of that. But like the Jeff Johns run, I mean, I kind of dump on it whenever I bring it up, but it's because I just felt like it was looking backwards. I felt like it was him being a huge fan of the Christopher Reeve Richard Donner movie and trying to make that into comic book form. It's like right now, as we're recording this, there's a miniseries going on that's set in the world of the
Mm-hmm.
Richard Donner movie. That's great. That's wonderful that
Yeah.
exists. You can step back into that world in the comic book, and that's great. But I don't love the idea of taking the regular ongoing Superman story and morphing it into that, just because you have this love and affinity for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, as far as the style aspect, yeah, I agree totally. I mean, I think in the beginning, in the '40s with Schuster and Wayne Boring, you really did have that boxer look, the circus strongman look, where
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it wasn't, he wasn't ripped, he wasn't lean, like he was stocky, right? Like he was just like a
Yeah.
solid guy.
Yeah, he looks like
Um,
my grandpa, dude. Like straight up. Like my grandpa was in the army in World War II and stuff, and like he just, and then he was a coal miner when he after World War II. So my grandpa was like a tough dude. Like I mean, like a really like strong, tough dude. And like up until he was like his deathbed, he was like he had muscle, dude. He was like a strong, and like it just. Whenever I see a drawing of Superman from the '40s, like it looks like his face, everything, the hair, everything looks exactly like him. It's crazy.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, and you see that too. I think even in the George Reeves Superman show, especially in
Mm-hmm.
the first couple of seasons, he put on weight as the series went on and he got older. But those first couple of seasons, I think kind of fit into that mold. And then, yeah, I mean, as we move forward into Kurt Swan and then the Christopher Reeve movie, you definitely get a sleeker Superman, but
Mm-hmm.
then more muscular. And then, like you said, certainly by the time we're in the '80s, we do have like the really,
It's
you know,
Schwarzenegger, baby.
you
It's
know,
like, or Stallone, you know?
where do you kind of land on that? Because I think it's Alex Ross who's talked about this, where he doesn't subscribe to the notion that Superman would be particularly muscular, right? And wouldn't
He
need,
draws him super muscular, though, doesn't he?
but it's
Alex
it.
Ross, when I think Alex Ross, I think like big chest, like big arms.
Well,
Like,
it's the size, but it's like not. I guess not the level of definition that
oh,
you've seen elsewhere.
I mean, like, I, I would just assume that Superman's like metabolism is that he's just naturally like ripped. Like, because there's people like that in real life. I mean, they're not going to be as huge, but they're going to be like, there's people who like are just naturally like really lean. You know, I would just assume that's what Superman would be.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like I mean, like the muscle size again. I think it's like his metabolism's so good from the from the sun that like whatever he eats just goes into muscle. So that's how he's got like the huge like delts and stuff, you know.
Right, right, right. So a few questions for you. So, and I know we've talked about this before, but the red trunks, yay or nay?
I don't really. I mean, I don't dislike. I mean, they don't offend me. You know what I mean? But like, I just personally, objectively, think they don't really like look cool. Like, and please, internet, don't hate me. Like, I still love Superman. I love Christopher Reeve. I love every version of Superman. But like, I don't know. I mean, now that they're back, it's like whatever. Like, I feel like they're gonna be around forever because they're back. But like, I don't know. I don't think they're necessary. Just same with Batman. Like, I don't think they like add to the character. You know. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
I'm with you. I guess I don't feel that strongly about them. Like when they take them away, I'm not up in arms about it. When they bring them back, I'm not dancing in the
Mm-hmm.
streets. You know, it's like if I could take them or
Yeah.
leave them. I don't really feel that strongly about them. Um,
As long as he has a belt. Like I feel like if you took away the
yeah,
underwear and the belt and it would just look like a onesie, like I feel like that would look a little weird. Like it needs like the break, like he needs like that break at the waist, you know. Like I feel like a red belt with like a yellow center, I think would be perfect.
gotcha.
Like however, like the buckle be yellow but the belt be red, so some kind of version of that. I don't know.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool.
Yeah.
So now when because you've had the opportunity to draw Superman, you did a
Mhm.
number of issues on Trinity, and you did the Superman Man of Tomorrow, an
Mhm.
issue of that as well. So when you're drawing Superman, I mean, obviously, when the character undergoes a major redesign, that's like Jim Lee is like redesigning the character right at the top. But
Mhm.
I mean, are there certain things where you're like, oh man, like I really wish I could just change this, but it's something that would require approval, you know, from like from the higher ups at
So,
DC.
so now I'm a lot more confident than when I was drawing Trinity. When I was drawing Trinity, I was just starting at DC, and like I was trying very hard to work in the mold that they had, like the Jim Lee like mold that like I feel like a lot of artists like whether consciously or not like work in that mold, you know, because Jim Lee is like the most famous artist that there is, you know, so he's inspired an entire generation, like myself included. So but now I feel like I've been changing my style a lot, and I'm trying really hard now. I think it was when I started working on Silencer, but then really on Aquaman was when I was like, I'm gonna try to make this like completely my own because like the when I was working on Aquaman, like he had the long hair and the beard, and Jim Lee had never drawn him like that, like to my knowledge, like at least on any kind of regular basis. So it was like there's no like template in my head that DC thinks this needs to look like. So I'm gonna do like my thing with it, and that was kind of like eye opening to me, where I'm like, I need to do this with every character I work on. So like when I worked on Kyle Rayner or Hal Jordan or whoever it may be, like I'm trying to bring like my own kind of like unique voice to it, and like with Superman, like when I worked on the Man of Tomorrow issue, like it was very much that. Like I was trying to come up with a way that like he looked like my style and not like I'm trying to approximate someone else's, you know. So like for me personally, it was like the hair more than anything. Like a lot of people draw like the wave in it and stuff. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna make it like a spike, like the curl part's like a spike, and make it look like a little more like angular and spikier and less like I guess real. Like I'm trying to get away from like reality in my art and go more with like kind of just like almost like an abstracted look of like what reality is, if that makes sense. I don't know. That might sound really like artsy fartsy, but yeah, there we
No,
go.
I think it's cool to get that insight into the process. So no, I love to hear that. I also have a listener question. So patrons have the opportunity to submit a question in advance. And so Eric asked
Sweet.
specifically for you, he said, for V Ken, is there a superhero with a more iconic costume than Superman? Spider-Man is the only hero that comes to mind to me, given how many different versions of costumes that Batman has had. Maybe Flash? Is there a superhero with a more iconic costume than Superman?
Okay, I love Flash, but his costume's not nearly as iconic as Superman's. Like I love Flash, but um, yeah, hmm, that's a tough one. I mean, if we're specifically talking, or we talk like American superhero comics, if we're specifically talking that, I think Superman's the most iconic. Like flat. I mean, like not even close. Like because like you said, Batman's had so many different looks. But to that effect though, the Batman costume has kind of always kind of stayed similar though. Like how we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
Superman, like he's never like you've never looked at Batman and been like even like the Arkham Knight to um like the 1950s Batman, like the Adam West. Like no one's gonna look at either of them and be like, who is this? You know what I mean? Like it's clear, like he's got the ears, he's got the gloves, he's got the cowl. Like so, I think. Yeah. I mean, I always tell people that I think the most Eric hit it on the head is that the most iconic superheroes are Superman, Batman, Spider Man. Like you know,
Yeah.
trying to think like Captain America, no, because he's like in the movies doesn't even wear the costume, the iconic one. Iron Man, no. I don't know. Do you have any that you think might be?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I definitely think Superman, but I do agree with your point about Batman, and I think they do fall into the same category there, where even though there have been variations, the same again, it's like just that elemental aspect, those certain basic components. Even they get tweaked, the colors might change a little bit, trunks might come and go, but it's like the same components, and I guess that's the beauty of those costumes, and maybe that helps account for why, in part why these characters have endured, because it's like they are adaptable to an extent while still retaining that recognizability. Like it's really a balance to strike. So
yeah. I mean, because Marvel, I'm trying to think of Marvel, like with the exception of Spider-Man, I feel like all the Marvel characters' costumes have changed so much over the decades, right? Like, I mean, I was gonna say maybe the yellow Wolverine costume. I feel like that's pretty iconic, but like not anywhere close to Superman's. Like,
yeah,
um,
no, I'm with
I
you.
don't know. And I mean, if you go out of American stuff, I would say like Goku is pretty iconic, but like again, not on the same level as Superman. Like I think Superman's like, yeah, he's the most iconic one for sure.
And then I guess maybe two more questions for you. These, I mean, these are probably less so evolution of the style and more just style questions generally. But when we talk about the live action versions of Superman, what's your favorite take on the costume on screen?
Oh, on the costume, not actor, costume. You're
Costume,
talking
yeah.
just costume. Oh, it's got to be the Man of Steel costume from Henry Cavill's first costume, because they changed it in Batman vs Superman. I like the first one, the Man of Steel one. I think that'd be my favorite.
Yeah.
Although the black one was pretty sweet too in Snyder Cut. That one was good. But if we're talking like iconic versions, I think that would be it. Probably. I mean, the Christopher Reeve costume, dude, like in real life looks like crappy. Have you ever seen it? Like I remember I was oh my God, I was visiting Los Angeles when I was like in fifth grade or whatever with my parents, and like we went to like on one of those studio tours, and like they had the cape hanging there, and the cape, the yellow S on the back of the cape is like, it looks like it's like ironed on, like it's like so like janky looking, like in real life, but like it just on camera, because they didn't have high def back then, like it pops really well. But like, yeah, it's like, and then when at Comic-Con when they had all the costumes lined up, the Christopher Reeve, like the S is like lopsided and stuff. Like that costume is not. It's a testament to Christopher Reeve that he looked that good in that costume. Like,
No, yeah, no, 100%, 100%. All right, so you go with the Henry Cavill version. Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, I would have to go with the CGI suit that Tom Welling wore in the series finale of Smallville. Boy, that was great. Really loved it.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, I think the worst is probably the Superman Returns one, because the S was so small. It was like the S was like so small, and he just had like tons of like blue on his stuff. It was so like weird, and the red was like a maroon almost. Like it was a very weird costume. I think that was probably my least favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't cite it as number one, but as you and the audience know, I mean, I was very taken with the George Reeves series, and so I do love that. I do love that original costume from that show.
I like how that costume like looks like sweatpants and sweatshirt. Like it's not tights; it looks like just a tight fitting like sweatsuit, which I think that's like a cool take. I think
Yeah.
You see like the ribbing on his wrists and stuff of like a sweatshirt. That's a cool take.
Yeah. So that really that definitely made an impression. I mean, again, there's something very quintessential and iconic about the Christopher Reeve costume. But again, I really do love the Henry Cavill version as well. And I agree with you. I like the Man of Steel one better than the Batman v Superman. And then as far as the black suit, you mentioned for Zack Snyder's Justice League, I guess that's one of the last questions I have for you on the style. As far as the alternate versions of the costume, I guess I know is the black suit your favorite of the alternate takes?
The black suit's up there. It's probably a tie between that and the one he wears in Godfall. We talked about that when he's on the
Yeah.
motorcycle. That's a cool costume because it's black and silver and red. It's got like it's kind of like a mix between the black costume and the regular costume, and it's got like this cool like thing going over his shoulders. Like I really like that one too.
Nice. I mean, I enjoyed when we talked about Godfall. I don't know that I would put that costume too high on my list, though. It was cool. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely the black suit would be my favorite alternate. Beyond that, like I don't think Electric would rank that highly for me.
Nah. I like do you remember the Hunter Prey one?
Dude, oh my God. You and I are on the same page because I swear the next words out of my mouth were Hunter Prey. Yeah.
That was a cool costume. That was a really cool costume.
Yeah, that holds a special place because that was, again, at the beginning of my time reading comics, and that always, that one made an impression on me. So, and I'll be revisiting that on the podcast relatively soon. So I do look forward to seeing that costume again. And then, the last thing, and you and I were texting about this not too long ago, about the look of Clark Kent, right? Which, of course, Clark has undergone his own evolution over the years. And I was saying to you, and we differed on this, but I was like, I love... I was a big fan of the Matt Bomer White Collar series on USA. And in that show, he's, he's got the skinny tie and like the sleek suits and the fedora. And I was like, I would like to see that for modern day Clark. And I know you were not on board with that.
Well, I thought he'd look like weird, like in real life, because like it would be like he'd walk into the office and people would be like, what do you think, you're a fashion model, like with your like fedora and stuff, like to me, like Clark Kent, like a modern day Clark Kent would wear like a hoodie and like a baseball hat and like maybe sometimes a tie underneath, but like I feel like if he was truly trying to like blend in, like I lived in New York City for 12 years. I know that most people, unless you work on Wall Street, are not wearing suits to work. You know what I mean? Most people are wearing like sneakers, maybe a button-down shirt, usually a t-shirt with like a hoodie and like a baseball hat. Like I feel like if he's trying to like not stand out, and that's why I think Tyler Hoechlin on Superman Lois is so good at it, because like he looks like Clark Kent, but he looks like a modern Clark Kent, right? And like the Matt Bomer thing, like you're right, like visually, aesthetically, that would look great, right? It would look super great, but it would have to exist in a world of like somewhat heightened fantasy, like a Tim Burton-esque world where like things aren't quite real, because like nobody like working at the New York Times dresses like that. You know what I mean? And if they did, people would be talking about it. People would be like, whoa, we're paying this guy too much, he's wearing Dolce & Gabbana hats every day, like
That's true. Well, and I think, again, this is probably a larger conversation, but I think too, you talk about the evolution of Clark, but even just some of the settings that the stories take place in. I mean, we've seen across media, right, an evolution of the Daily Planet, and I do think more modern takes have reflected, I guess, the kind of the current state of newspapers. It's not quite as maybe glamorous as it might have been in the past, and I think you definitely do see, and not limited to a newspaper, but you do definitely see less formality in the wardrobe, and you definitely do see dressing down more, and that's why I did like in the Snyder movies when Clark was at the Daily Planet, I think there too, there was still a tie, but like he was mostly wearing flannel button-down shirts.
And he had khaki jeans, like he looked very like not super fancy. You know what I mean? Like, and like to me, like Clark, like I don't ever really imagine Clark as being like a fashion forward guy. Do you? Like I imagine him as very like just kind of like very like blue collar, like like I don't really see him shopping at like Bloomingdale's or anything like that. Like he just seems like very like down to earth, like Amazon, like getting everything off Amazon.
Well, that's the thing, right? He comes from the Midwest. Not that if you come from the Midwest, you can't be fashion forward, but it's like, I think given his upbringing, given his other priorities, it's like, he probably would go for something, kind of, but just, to get the job done. Right.
Yeah. Whereas like Bruce Wayne, I could see wearing the fedora, like, like, and it would making sense, Yeah.
Well, listen, again, we're going to do, I think at some point in the life cycle of this podcast, we'll do, more of a deep dive into the visual evolution and style. But this was fun to have this chat, and I hope people enjoyed it. And when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to get into Steel. And man, Ken and I have a lot to say about this. So
yeah, we do.
Stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Shadadigans is a weekly podcast by dads sharing their fairly new dad experiences and also just talking about whatever. Listen, relate, and laugh. I was a guest on episode 90, and it was a blast. One of the hosts is a multiple guest of this show, Justin DeVoe. To follow Justin's fitness and cosplay journey, follow him on Instagram at RealLifeLobo. And if you're interested in starting or continuing your own fitness journey, check out Iron and Honor on Instagram. All right, we're back. So
Before we
yeah.
Wait, before we dive into Steel, just from that commercial, I want to shout out Justin. I met him at New York Comic Con this year, and he got a Lobo commission from me, and he was like in the Lobo suit, looks friggin' dope in real life. Like I follow him on Instagram, and the pictures obviously look great, but in real life, like it's crazy, dude. He looks like he like stepped right out of the page. Like big shout out to Justin. Yeah, man. If you guys aren't following him on Instagram, definitely check him out. He's got a great costume for Lobo, and he's got a very cool like fitness like journey that he posts updates from and stuff. And dude's jacked in real life, like super jacked. Like I was shocked like how jacked he looks in real life. So yeah, big shout out to Justin.
Right on. I echo all of that. Justin's such a great guy, and it's funny because he listens to the show. And he commented recently that, sometimes I guess he gets caught up in it and he'll talk to, he'll talk to us on the show, even though obviously we're not all talking together. And I said to him, I'm like, I should mess with you in an upcoming episode and just like randomly address you at some point in the recording just to throw him off. So I don't know. Maybe we'll do that at some point. But yeah, big shout out to Justin. And I agree. Everyone should follow him at Real Life Lobo. It's really remarkable the fitness and cosplay journey that he's been on. And yeah, he's jacked. He's covered in tattoos, and he is the sweetest guy you'll meet, and just so warm and enthusiastic about all of this. And of course, he's been on the show. People have gotten a chance to hear that as well. And actually, Justin is going to be here. Here, I'll plug an upcoming episode. Justin will be here in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about the Injustice animated movie.
Very cool.
So I'm excited for that because I've not played the game or read the comics, but Justin has. And of course, I will watch the animated movie. So I think we'll have I've been very curious about Injustice. I've heard a lot from a lot of people about it. And I think the animated movie is a perfect way for me to kind of see what the fuss is all about. And especially to talk to him where he'll have experienced, all versions of the story across media. I think we'll have a really great chat. So that's coming up.
Awesome. Justin, tell us what you think about Steel real quick. No.
Yeah. Justin, did you ever watch the 1997 Steel movie? He's yelling in his car right now. He's like, yeah, I did. So actually, you know what? Before we even talk, let me play a little something because I think we need, as much as I know you and I, we've been ready to go. We've been ready to talk about Steel, but I don't think it would hurt us, and it certainly wouldn't hurt the audience. Just a little something to just put us in the right frame of mind, get us pumped up. So I'm going to play something now, just for a few seconds, because I think this will get the job done.
So good.
I mean, how good is that theme?
It's a good theme. That's a really good. I didn't remember the theme, and then like watching it, I was like, the opening crawl. I was like, this is a good theme song.
All right, so Steel. We are of course talking about Dr. John Henry Irons, right? Who is introduced in the Reign of the Superman storyline in 1993. He becomes the armored character Steel following Superman's death at the hands of Doomsday. John Henry had been saved by Superman sometime prior, and he said, "I owe you my life." And Superman said, "Well, make it count for something." And on top of that, John Henry was also dealing with the guilt of the weapons that he designed being used for nefarious purposes by the military-industrial complex. So he had this dual purpose of trying to honor the promise he made to Superman while also atoning for what he considered, I guess, to be his misdeeds in designing these weapons. And so, of course, he plays a prominent role in Reign of the Superman and has continued to be a supporting character in the comics. He had his own series for a few years in the 90s. It lasted 52 issues, primarily written by Louise Simonson and then Christopher Priest. And you and I read issue number 1, and we'll talk about that.
Hell yeah.
And again, most recently, he's been featured on the Superman and Lois TV show. He popped up in Superman the Animated Series, some appearances in the Justice League cartoon. But he also had his own feature-length movie from Warner Brothers in 1997, written and directed by Kenneth Johnson and starring noted Superman fan and now retired basketball player Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaq, baby. Hell
Shaq.
yeah.
So, man, there's so much that we have to unpack here, but let me just start, I guess, with the biggest, perhaps most important question for you first, because for our audience's sake, like the texts that Ken and I have been exchanging, they've been along the lines of like, I can't wait to discuss. I have so much to say, but we haven't compared notes yet, but I can guess where you're going. So what was your impression of your rewatch?
Oh my god. So like overall, okay, so I'm gonna go macro. Overall, so I first saw this movie when I was in fourth grade. Rented it from Blockbuster, and like I absolutely love. Now I'd already been a fan of the character because I had some of the comics and I had the action figure from the Man of Steel where like he had the hammer and he like swung it and he had the cape and everything. And like so I was already a fan of the character, and like my favorite basketball player was playing at the time my favorite character, and I was just psyched to see this movie. And like upon rewatch, dude, for me it held up. Like in a way, it not by modern standards, but like we can get into this later. But like I totally watching it now, I totally understood why I love this movie so much and why I love this character so much. And I think that even though there's a lot of corny stuff in it, and like objectively, it's not like a great movie. Like objectively, I think there's still really good stuff in there. Really good things about the character Steel. Really good things for like as like a kids superhero movie, which is kind of what these things are supposed to be, right? Like now they've gotten so dark and serious that like it's kind of like lost that. Like there's so much like elements in this movie that like just like his lair with like the mechanics of the doors opening and stuff. Like it was just so cool as a kid. And like watching it again, like Laura was watching it with me and she's like, I totally get why you like this when you were a kid. And I was like, yeah, it's and not only that, dude, like Shaq looks fucking cool in this movie. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear, but like he looks good in the suit. He looks cool. Like maybe some of the reveals and stuff weren't great, and maybe some of the action wasn't up to par, but like he looked dope. And like the only thing he was missing for me was the cape, but like he still looked dope. And like I don't know, what did you think?
I got to tell you, man, and we were talking about this off mic, but it's been a long week, like very long days. And I was watching this late last night, and whether I was delirious or what, but man, I had fun with this movie. I had so much fun watching it. And, you know, I mean, I agree with you. Would I say like, oh, objectively, this, you know, stands, you know, shoulder to shoulder with the current crop of superhero movies that have achieved
Absolutely not.
a very high level of, you know, production quality and storytelling? No, but I do think there's a lot of value in this movie. And I really think that, because, you know, look, if you mention the Steel movie to anyone who knows about it, very likely they don't have a favorable impression of it. I think most have written it off. It was a box office bomb when it came out in 97. It was not received well critically. Again, I think even among fans, generally speaking, you know, you probably wouldn't find a lot of like diehard Steel movie fans. But honestly, like, I really do think there's a lot worthwhile about it. I mean, like, if anyone is listening to this or watching this and you've not watched it or you haven't watched it in a while, you know what? Cue it up. Unfortunately, it's no longer on HBO Max, which we discovered. But I rented it on Amazon.
Squirreled.
We got flat squirreled. I know. My whole thing about, you know, hesitation kills, don't be a flat squirrel. Waited too long and it left HBO Max. But I rented it on Amazon for $3. It's worth $3.
I
And you bought it.
Yeah, I did. It was between the two of them, and Laura was like, she's like, it's $3 more. You think you're gonna watch this again? I go, I definitely will watch this again. She's like, just buy it. I'm no regrets. Like, absolutely no regrets. Like, this is a movie I'm gonna watch with my kids. Like, I think this is like such a like for kids specifically. Like, I think this like yes, it's definitely not up to the standards we were talking about now, but I think there's a lot of good messages in it for kids, right? And like just the fact that like there's a point in the movie where like Steele's like we will get into it more, but like he's like at odds with the cops, right? Because he's trying to stop this gang violence, and like they think he's part of one of the gangs, and the cops are chasing him. And he there's a point where he gets brought in for like questioning, and like he's in like the police lineup and stuff, and like the people that he saved were asked to come in and identify him, and they're like, and like it's obvious Shaq is Steel, right? he's like 7'6", you know what I mean? But they're like, no, we don't see him here. And then the cop that he saved did the same thing. And it's like just those like notions of like, you do the right thing, like doing the right thing is cool. You know what I mean? And like, I feel like Steel to me, like even more so than Superman in some levels, why I like him so much is that like, I just think he's a really good dude. You know what I mean? Like he's like, he doesn't come from that like he doesn't have the inner conflict that Superman has about like being the last of his kind and like kind of like feeling alone and out of place in the world. Like Steel is just like a good salt of the earth person, like was raised with the right values, like and he sees that like something that he sees as his responsibility. Like he designed these weapons and they got out, they were stolen from the military in some way. Like in the comics it was through Intergang, I think. In the movie it's a little different, but the weapons he designed are now on the streets in the hands of gangs tearing up his neighborhood, and he feels it's his responsibility to protect his family and to protect his neighborhood. And he's just like a good solid person with a good moral compass. And like I don't know, man, like I just think like the simplicity of that and how likable he is like it's so refreshing to me, like because he's not a character born out of tragedy, right? Like he's not someone whose parents were killed in front of him like so many superheroes are, you know. He's just like someone who's like, I want to do the right thing, and like I'm gonna do the right thing. And more to that, he becomes Superman. You know what I mean? Like not only he's like a regular human being with no superpowers who essentially becomes Superman. And like there's such a powerful message in that. And like I think he's a very undervalued character for sure.
So a couple of things. One, that scene at the police station with the lineup was probably my favorite scene in the movie. I thought it was a very poignant scene. And, you know, there's a lot about the movie that's fun. There's a lot that's goofy, but like that was an instance where I was like, exactly to your point. It's like, yeah, it really shows the effect that his goodness and his good actions are having. And the fact that the people he helped now are helping him, I thought was great. I really like that as well. It's funny though, you mentioned about his motivations, because in addition to reading issue 1, I did also read the 0 hour, 0 issue of the Steel series. And it recounts his origin. His parents were killed. He did come home and find his parents killed.
Oh, okay.
I'm not laughing because it's funny that his parents were killed, but I'm just, but you know what you were saying.
Forget everything I just said.
Well, no, but I think your point still stands, because that's never really painted as like his driving force, or at least it doesn't seem to be. I mean, it's like this idea of family, yes, but it's not necessarily I have to avenge, my fallen parents.
It's about protecting his like grandma and his cousins and stuff. You know, it's not about like getting revenge for his dude. I didn't even know he had parents. Like I just that's totally new to me because I never read the 0 hour stuff. So yeah, that's sorry I messed that up.
No, it's quite no. It's again, had I not read that issue, I would have been right there with you. So, but again, I think that also speaks to the fact that it's not like a huge piece of his character, at least the way, he's typically presented, right? The fact that that wasn't even top of mind.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine.
What else I found really interesting about the movie, and this is why I wanted you to read issue 1, is that I think the movie's actually really faithful to the comic book in a weird way. Like Superman's not involved, but like it's pretty much Steel's story though, about being a weapons designer, about going back home to his old neighborhood, about protecting his grandmother and his cousin, and his cousin getting mixed up with the gangs. Like it's pretty like spot on to that early like Steel. Like even like visually, there's like panel shots like when the guys break into his house and he uses the frying pan as a hammer, or when he's pulling the mask out of the when he's like welding his suit and he pulls the mask out. There's a shot very similar to Steel #1 where he's like pulling the mask out of the fire. Like, so I was actually really shocked about that rewatching it again, that I was like, this is very faithful to like the comic book, which surprises me for the time period, like, I don't know. I found that very interesting, that like, it must have been a passion project for the director. Cause I noticed it was directed by the same guy, and it must've been someone who was like, I freaking love Steel and I want to make this movie,
Yeah, well, so I had the exact same thought, and I'm glad that you suggested reading the first issue of the comic as well, because that was the same thing that I was struck by. I was like, wow, this really tracks with what we see in the movie. And again, the comic came first, so yeah, so the movie was definitely more faithful than I think it gets credit for. I feel like the fact that Steel's story was told in a vacuum, completely separate from any mention of Superman. I think that's why fans are probably like, oh, like it, wasn't really faithful to the comics. But in terms of John Henry's story, it was very faithful. It's just that,
it's
yes,
like dead on. Yeah.
They strip away all the Superman stuff. Now, so, Kenneth Johnson was the writer and director. Yeah, I don't know to what extent, he was a fan of the comic or the character. I do know I know, as if I read it on Wikipedia, but Quincy Jones was one of the producers, and he and I guess his producing partner, I think they had the fandom for the character, and they were kind of like the driving force behind it. And, this was that weird limbo period for Superman on the big screen, right? Because the Christopher Reeve movie series was done, and we hadn't yet arrived at the Bryan Singer attempt at restarting it. And, this was that whole period, when we almost
Nicolas
had
Cage
the Tim Burton, Nicolas Cage movie. And so the Superman movie, I think, was just stuck in this development hell. And according to Wikipedia, I think the original plan was for this, because, right, the plan was to do the Death of Superman, right? I think that was the Superman Lives movie that didn't ultimately get made. That was the
Tim Burton one?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And so the idea was to do the death, and again, according to Wikipedia, Steel would have been a spinoff of that, and so it would have tracked with this idea that Superman dies and then Steel rises to take his place. And then obviously that didn't happen, and so they just made it completely standalone. So, in that sense, it's like, yeah, you do remove a key piece of the character's backstory. Although we do still get the nod to Superman because Shaq has his Superman tattoo.
Yeah. In my head, this movie takes place in the same universe as Christopher Reeve's Superman. Like in my head canon. And Tim Burton's Batman. So like in this universe, Michael Keaton and Christopher Reeve exist. That's my my 90s verse of movies that Steel exists in.
Well, so you know what though? And I mean, look, not to overthink this, but because the thought did cross my mind, because they really do focus on that Superman tattoo. That's the Shaq's real tattoo, but they focus on it in the movie in a couple of places. And Uncle Joe at one point says to him, like, you're not Superman. Now, I guess you can read that a couple of ways. Like in the world of this movie, does Superman exist? And John Henry idolizes him and he got a tattoo? Or is it like our world and Superman's a fictional character? You can read it either way.
I take it that Superman exists because even the cops mentioned Batman too about the Batcave, I think. So I'm gonna assume in this world Batman and Superman exist because they never show comic books. It's never like you never see like Shaq reading a Superman comic, which I feel like could have been like something that they did, like a very easy thing. You know what I mean? Like when he's on the bus or something coming home, he could have been reading a Superman comic and they didn't do that. So in my head canon, Superman exists.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid way of looking at this. And then you still sort of have this idea that Superman inspired him. Now, not to nitpick, but I was thinking about this. I'm like, well, even if that Death and Return of Superman movie didn't happen, that Steel would have been a spinoff of, right? So that didn't happen. I don't know. They could have still worked in the Death of Superman into this. Like you could have shown Superman's tattered cape on the news. And John Henry, like they could have, kind of worked it in its own way. I don't know if maybe that would have felt like they were just kind of forcing it. I don't know. But I still think there's a way like they could have made it work, at least tangentially.
Yeah, they could have. I mean, I feel like they, by removing the Superman part of it, I feel like it doesn't radically change the character, though. Like that's the thing is that because in the comics, he becomes Steel because Superman's gone. And then he like gives up being Steel and goes home. And then when he goes home, it's the gang violence that makes him like reemerge, right? So like by taking out that first chunk, it's just like basically all you remove is the S shield and the cape, right? Which I still think he could have had the cape. It's not like a huge thing, but like you're basically just taking off the S from the suit, So it's like I think it still works even without Superman. Like it's not 100% accurate, but like his story, like we were talking about, John Henry Irons' story, is actually very, very spot on to what they were doing. So,
yeah, I don't disagree, and I also think too, like the way that John Henry is presented in the comics, that he does have this, sort of dual motivation, right? He had been saved by Superman, and then he wants to step up when Superman's gone, but there is also this issue that the weapons he designed are on the street. So it's like if you take away one, well, he still has a reason to do this on top of just that inherent goodness and desire to protect, like we talked about. So, again, I think that speaks to the richness of the character. Like, there's enough there that even if you take away a piece, and I mean, the Superman aspect is not a small piece, but even if you take that away, it does still work, which I think is cool. Now, so I wanted to ask you about the comic series. How much, if at all, have you read of that
I've read
90s
like
series?
random issues, man. Like number 8, I think was my first one I ever had, and then I had number 1, and then I had a couple like random ones in there. But like that was at a time when like issues were actually like one and done adventures with like subplots going through them. So like that's pretty much like my extent of it was that. Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, I owned issues 1 and 2. I very specifically remember having those first couple of issues of the Steel series that Louise Simonson wrote with John Bogdanov, who, of course, the two of them had created the character in Superman, the Man of Steel, and Chris Batista did the art on the Steel series, and then eventually Simonson would just take over the writing herself. But yeah, I really only read those first couple of issues. I for whatever reason, I guess as a kid at that time, it didn't grab. But you know, it's funny, Superboy as well. I remember having the first couple of issues of the Superboy series that came out after Reign of the Superman, and I didn't continue with that either. So I couldn't really tell you why. I don't remember, but that's really it. And I know I dump on the DC app a lot, but all 52 issues of the Steel series are on the app. So that's something that I think I'll probably come back to at another point on this podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm actually thinking about like because they're all in Comixology too. So like after I read the first one, I'm like I kind of want to keep going with this because like this is like because it was so nostalgic for me rereading that first issue because that issue specifically, like my copy of it that's at my parents' house is like tattered because I read it so much, dude. Like it was like it's interesting to see it now because so much of it's like burned into my head from when I was a kid. Then I was seeing it now like with fresh eyes, it's like oh that didn't look. It's not quite how I remembered it. Or it looks kind of different, you know. So
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so now, I guess going back to the movie, so I know you liked it as a kid. So it came out in 97. I was 10. I'm almost positive I saw it in theaters.
okay, I didn't see it
And
in theaters.
I mean, I'm almost positive. And that would track because, again, even though it, didn't have Superman in the movie, I mean, I certainly knew the character from the Superman comic. So that would have piqued my interest. And I know I never talk about sports on the show because I don't follow sports now, but when I was in elementary school, I was really into basketball.
Shaq, dude,
And
Shaq.
yeah,
Yeah, he was the best, man. And speaking of Shaq, like he's perfect for this. Like perfect. We can. I want you to finish your thought. We'll come back to that, but
no, I was just going to say that, again, I have this memory. I'm pretty sure that I saw it in theaters. I couldn't really tell you did I come away from it in love with the movie or disappointed by the movie? I don't know. Maybe it just didn't make that strong of an impression. I don't know. But I guess certainly as time has passed, whenever I have thought of it, it has always been in that more dismissive way that I think you do hear from a lot of fans. And, I don't know to what extent that's because that's what I actually remember of it, or it's been colored now by the fact that, and I don't think the movie is even referenced all that much. And when it is, it's usually, as a punchline.
yeah, it's
So
cool that time Shaq tried to act. Like
yeah,
people say, yeah.
exactly. So, I went into this rewatch again, really not expecting much. And I was really looking at it more as this, curiosity, this, relic of 97. And it's like, I'll take a look at it. And like I said, I really ended up enjoying it. And I want to come back to what you were just saying, because so the movie typically, right, I think gets criticized for its, the corniness, the cheesiness, the datedness. I mean, it feels very 90s, and
I love it.
watching.
I loved every minute of that. I loved it.
But that's the thing, watching it now, it really just plays more like a fun throwback,
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But, I think the datedness, the cheesiness, and the acting, I mean, Shaq's performance is not something that I think people usually hold up. However, I want you to finish your thought, because I have a specific feeling about this as well. So why do you think Shaq was perfect?
Okay, like Shaq is not. I don't think. I don't. If Shaq heard us talking about this, I don't think he'd get mad at me saying this. Like, I don't think he's a very good actor, right? Like, great basketball player, dude. He's my favorite basketball player of all time. Like, I fucking love you, Shaq. If you're listening to this, like, but I think he's very much in the realm of like, there's certain actors who like don't have a lot of range, but they're really good at what they do, right? Like Keanu Reeves is a good example. I mean, Keanu Reeves is a better actor, but like he doesn't have like super wide range, but like when he's doing his like action movies as Keanu Reeves, like you just buy it, right? and he's awesome at it. And Shaq is just so damn likable. Like he's like such a good dude, and like he's very well known for being this very affable, very friendly, very polite person. And like you just buy it as him as John Henry is like, I totally buy that this guy is like the best human being on the planet. Like I just like he's just so nice and so, like he just exudes like niceness and like goodness, you know, and like and that combined with the fact that he looks like a superhero, like he's like huge, he's like this massive person, like it just it just worked for me, man. Like I don't know, like if you made this movie today, like we can get into that later, but like I don't know quite like there's this it factor that Shaq had that he brought to it of just being like very very likable and like very affable and genuine, you know. And like I think that's super important for John Henry Irons. Like if we talk about other actors, like modern actors, like taking on the role, like I think that is something that's really really important, you know, that like just that goodness that like comes out of Shaq in his performance for this.
Yeah, you know, when watching this, I did feel like people had been unfair to Shaq in this movie. You know, was this an Oscar-worthy performance? No, but I think that, I mean, a couple of things. One, yeah, he does possess that charm and that larger than life quality. Like he has a presence on the screen for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think his presence, you know, matches kind of what you would want to see from this character. So I think it works on that level. You know, in terms of his actual acting chops, my take on it was that when he was playing John Henry in scenes that were probably relatively close to Shaq in real life, it worked better. So, you know, when he's joking around with the cousin or the back and forth with the grandmother, stuff like that, I felt like, okay, it just felt a lot more natural. You know, some of the scenes when he was talking to his former commanding officer in the military, those were like, okay, this is, it's a little clunky, but you know, again, overall, I think it worked. And, you know, just that physicality. And I thought the movie used it well. And it's one of those rare instances because, you know, he doesn't get the armor until pretty deep into the movie. And so there are plenty of scenes where he's fighting these gangs just by himself and you buy it. Like you totally buy it.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God, dude. The scene at the beginning when he's like, when Judd Nelson plays the bad guy in this movie, and which is crazy that like Judd Nelson's in this movie, but he like, so the movie starts off where Judd Nelson, Shaq, and the Sparks, her name Jenny Spark, or is it Jenny?
I don't know that it's Jenny, but Sparks, and they call her Sparky, and she's played by Annabeth Gish. Yeah,
Annabeth Gish. Those three are basically like the ones who like develop these weapons for the military, and Judd Nelson's character is like a shithead who's like trying to like I don't know what profit off the weapons, and like he does this during a demonstration. He dials the weapon way up past the which is crazy. It's like there's a switch on the gun that like is like intensity, like an intensity bar, and like they're only supposed to test at like level like 6, and he dials up to 12, and like it blows all, it sends a shockwave that like basically destroys the whole building, and it comes collapsing down and cripples Sparks. And so that's where the movie kicks off. So Sparks is then in a wheelchair for the rest of the movie. So that's like her, like that's a part of her arc, is coming back to like help Shaq. But anyway, they're at like a court martial scene where Judd Nelson's getting court martialed and Shaq's testifying to like the military court, right? And after the court martial, he's in the hallway, and Judd Nelson comes up to him and like tries to confront him. And like Laura and I were like, this is insane. Like if Judd Nelson like comes up to his belly button, like it's insane. And he's like, and he's acting as though he's like gonna beat him up. He's like, you watch your back, Irons. And like, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, it's crazy.
It's this great visual gag. And I mean, the two of them are, you know, facing off against each other in the frame. And it's like, you see them. And yeah, I mean, Shaq just Shaq is 7'1", and he just.
Are you sure he's not taller than that? I thought he was like 7'3", or is he 7'1"?
I saw that I think on IMDb, but yeah,
he's 7+ regardless. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? At that point, whether it's 7'1", 7'3", it's it's like once you
Yeah,
clear 7 feet.
yeah.
But that was hilarious. I thought you were actually going to say in the preceding scene when Sparks gets crushed by the rubble and John Henry
Oh, and
is
he's
lifting
he's
it.
pulling it up. He's like, ah, like yeah, and you believe it. You believe that Shaq would be able to pull up like a wall, like like
Yeah, and then there's another scene later on when he. So again, and you did a great job setting up the basic premise of the movie, right? Like Shaq and Sparks, they're these weapons designers for the military, like creating sound cannons and lasers and things like that. Judd Nelson, again trying to profit, sabotages this, weapons test. Sparks gets
it's like
paralyzed.
dishonored little discharge from the
Yeah,
military, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna steal this tech and sell it to like these scumbags in Los Angeles who are like
who
the most '90s like villains ever." Like,
that they run an arcade company,
yeah,
and the guy's name is Big Willie, and he runs an arcade company and also manufactures and distributes weapons in Los Angeles. And but anyway, so after Sparks gets paralyzed, John Henry quits the military and returns home to Los Angeles. That's a deviation from the comic, right? The comic, he's from DC. Here
DC,
it's
yeah.
Los Angeles.
Which I think it's because this was a very low budget movie and they filmed it all in Los Angeles, I think that's why. And because I would assume this is in the summer when between seasons,
Yes.
but yeah, I don't think like flying Shaq out to DC for like an extended movie. I think that was like out of the cards. So
Yeah, no, and I think LA worked, perfectly fine. But there's a scene later on. So again, John Henry returns home and is back in the old neighborhood, and then he starts to see these weapons that he had been involved with designing. He sees them on the streets in the hands of these gangs, robbing banks, things like that. And so, there's one scene where he goes to the pool hall, I think, to confront the gangs, and it's like he goes in unarmed up against them, but it's like you buy it and you're worried for the
yeah,
gang members. You're like, oh my God,
yeah,
what's
yeah.
he going to do? And he's picking
When he
people
throws
up.
the one guy up.
And I was reading, according to the IMDb trivia, they couldn't find a stunt person as large as Shaq. So Shaq did all his stunts himself.
Really? Wow.
According
Really?
to
That's awesome.
IMDb. But so that's the thing. I thought that, the physicality that he brought to this role, it really, I think, took it to another level. And also, I think the movie used it well. Like, again, there were scenes like that where they showed, what Shaq could do as this character. And then, look, at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't really something to, you can't judge a movie based on this necessarily, but I do consider the intention behind it. And we all know Shaq is this, noted Superman fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit something to that too, where it's like, I know, look, it was a job for him as well, but like the fact that he came to this with a love for the character,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that means something to me, as opposed to, I don't know, like when he did the Kazam movie, I don't know, that might have just been a paycheck sort of thing. But like, I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
here, this probably meant something to him. And I feel like that love for the character did come through. At least that was my take on it watching it,
I agree 100%, man. Like, I think that like he definitely brought like a love to it, and like you could tell he was trying to. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I will say this, that like I don't think anyone in this movie was like phoning it in. Like even Judd Nelson like felt like he was making character choices. Did you notice that? Like he was it wasn't like he was just kind of like sleepwalking through it. Like he like actually like was making these like quirky like character affectations and stuff to his guy, which like again bonkers that he was like in this movie. But like yeah, like one of the things I want to bring up. Do you remember the gang member with the eye patch?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember the scene where like Judd Nelson meets him in a park and he's
Mm-hmm.
wearing like a necklace, and Judd Nelson's like, "Oh, fancy necklace! Like you really shouldn't be doing that." And the gang member he says, "Oh, we're all getting paid. What's wrong with a little floss?" And Judd Nelson says, "You floss too much, your gums bleed." As a kid, dude, I thought they were actually talking about flossing, and I was like, wait, why does he need to be rich to get floss? Like I totally didn't get that it was slang for the necklace. Like I was like a 10-year-old. And that was something that stuck with me for like years. Like I was like, why did they have this weird thing about floss and steel? Like and like, but watching it again now, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. Like
I know. Oh, no, I know. It's so funny, like stuff that, makes like that impression as a kid, and maybe you don't have the full context for it. And then you finally, it finally clicks years later, and
yeah,
it's like, oh, I get what that was about.
yeah.
Yeah. I also have to say, again, like we said, they switched up from, DC to Los Angeles, but I also felt that they did a really good job of taking you into that neighborhood and really like creating that little world for you there with his family and the gangs and everything. I mean, it felt realistic. What'd you
Totally.
think?
I mean, the way his grandma's house was shot was like a little like storybookish. I thought like it was so bright. Like the color. Did you notice that? Like
Yeah, yeah.
inside, like it felt like the set of Full House or something. Like it was just so like the oranges and the pinks and everything were just so bright. And like when like he's walking down the street and it looks like a normal like Los Angeles street, and then comes to his grandma's house, it's like this bright yellow house. Like it was like that was a little funny, but like I thought it was cool how like his grandma's trying to open the restaurant, the black and bleu,
Yeah.
the a French, I can't remember, it was French mixed with something cuisine, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, it was like there was a very cool like world building I thought they did, for like his
Yeah.
whole supporting cast.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like that whole sequence where he gets off the bus and, he's walking through the old neighborhood and he's seeing everybody and reconnecting and everything. Yeah, I mean, I really felt like it pulled you into that. And it was a nice, again, we start off on the military side and then we kind of shift to this new setting, and I thought it worked. Let's take one more quick commercial break and then we'll unpack the rest of this movie and we'll talk maybe a little more about the comic as well. So we'll be right back. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. All right, and we're back. I won't play the theme music again, but it was such a cool theme. I will say this, though. They used that a lot in the movie. Like, anytime he did anything, that theme would play. But it was pretty good.
Yeah, no, it was a rousing theme for sure. It was like a get you like pumped up kind of theme,
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, one of, I guess a couple of other things that really stood out to me about this movie, not even so much, the very, very specifics of it, but more big picture that I really appreciated. One was that the stakes were very grounded and small, but not insignificant, right? There were these gangs using these weapons and they were stealing and they were hurting people, and John Henry was trying to stop it and keep his neighborhood safe. As much as, look, I see virtually all of the comic book movies that come out and they're great and I enjoy them. I mean, not every single one, but for the most part, generally speaking. But like one pet peeve I have is like so many of them, the stakes are always the end of the world or the end of the universe. It's like, it's so big all the time. And so I actually thought it was very refreshing that, it was really focused on this neighborhood. And I thought that worked well.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it made it like relatable too, especially in the 90s. Like I felt like that hit so like it was so like relatable as like a kid growing up in the 90s. Like I don't know, it just felt like something that could happen. Like as opposed to like aliens, or something crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other thing was that I guess overall I appreciate this, but it was more that I was struck by it. In the comics and certainly other depictions we've gotten of Steel in the cartoons and on Superman and Lois, the armor is basically like Iron Man's armor in terms of, especially in more recent depictions, in terms of how it, kind of forms around him and all that stuff, what it's capable of. He's got the boot thrusters that allow him to fly. There's a lot going on in the movie. It's very stripped down. I mean, it's
just like a suit of armor, like literally
it's really just a suit of armor. So they really scale that down. I mean, I'm assuming, budget wise, but I don't know. It kind of, like I said, it just gave the movie even more of that street level feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, again, I think made good use of Shaq's physicality, because it's like almost anyone else, if you put them in that suit of armor, I don't know how, how believable it would be or how compelling it would be, but it's, you see him in that and it's like, well, all right, let's see what he can do.
He looked cool. The armor looked cool on him. Like I said, I wish he had the cape, but I think it worked. And dude, the fact that the hammer was like giant, was on his back, like the giant hammer, and he kept it on his back, and like when he's on the motorcycle, he just looked cool. Like I don't know, I was like, and the fact that the hammer, like you could flip it around and turn it into a gun, it was just so much like cool like things that they were doing with it. I don't know. I thought it was like very cool because I forgot how the hammer was that like oversized and like huge. Like I totally forgot that. Like watching again, I was like, and it just looked cool, like on his back. Like I don't know. I was down with it. My favorite Steel costume is the one from the series that we just read. So the one that doesn't have the S and it's black and silver and then has the red cape. Like to me, that's like the perfect Steel costume. And like this came so close to that, it just didn't have the cape.
Yeah. No, cape would have been cool. But I too like the hammer. I also had forgotten about it converting, so I was like, oh, I totally forgot about that. What else? I mean, he has the magnet, right, that allows him to draw in all of the weapons nearby. Yeah. As far as other like, corny lines and things like that, there's that one point where one of the gang members is firing at him, and he's like, "I'll smoke you like a blunt,"
Yeah.
Again, like, so I mean, as we're talking about this movie and as we're quoting certain lines, I mean, I don't know if people are listening to this like, oh, like I don't know if it sounds appealing or not, but there's a certain charm to it.
What's your? I have a favorite line from the movie. Do you have a favorite line? Because I have a very distinctive favorite line. So the uncle, the grandpa, his uncle Joe. Okay, so Uncle Joe, throughout when he's building the armor, he first he goes, "Well, I'll be," and then then he does something else. He goes, "Well, I'll be damned," and then he makes a jump in the armor. He's like, "Well, I'll be damned," and then he gets shot out with bullets, and then he goes, "Well, I'll be dipped in shit and rolled in breadcrumbs." And I was like, "What?" Like, it's such like it's like so funny but so gross at the same time. It's like,
yeah, no, that was funny. Yeah. It was all, there's that other scene too where Uncle Joe, gives John Henry the hammer, and he's like, "I really like the shaft of the hammer." And they give him a look, and I said to myself, like, "Oh, were they just like making a kind of a lazy gay joke or your penis joke?" But then I looked up the actor played Shaft, because I had this feeling. I was God, I was like, I feel like there's more to this than a penis joke. I was like, I feel like there's something, and so that was kind of actually a nice nod.
Oh wow, I did not know that. I thought they were just making like a dick joke. That's what I thought they were doing. But yeah, that's really funny.
See, look, there's another example. This movie's so much more sophisticated than everybody gave it credit for.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, and then you mentioned we were talking about Sparks, right? Very much, not dissimilar from Oracle.
Oh yeah, totally.
The wheelchair-bound tech, partner.
Well, I was actually thinking about this. That's the first time in a live action like superhero thing? This was the first time there was like someone in the chair on the comlink talking in the ear, right? Like I feel like it's such a trope now, like in all the CW shows and the movies and stuff. But like I feel like this was the first time that ever was done. That's in a superhero capacity.
You know what? I think you're right. I mean, keeping in mind, right, this is 97. We don't have that many comic book movies ahead of it.
Yeah. But like, I don't think the trope existed. Like, I feel like now it's a very much a trope. It's like the superhero has the comlink in their head, and like their tech guys like in their base, like giving them info, But like, yeah, because like superhero movies prior to this, I feel like are like the Phantom, the Shadow, the Rocketeer, the Superman, Batman, obviously. Like, I don't think any of them had that, So I think this might have been the first one.
Look, another example of how this movie was really ahead of its time, and like in all seriousness, it really was. And not just that they had someone in his ear, but that this was a female character who was in a wheelchair. I mean, that's not something that you would have necessarily expected to see, especially in the 90s. So they really like gave that character, that prominent position. And yeah,
Mhm.
no, I mean, I think that was a cool choice.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the fact that like her and shit, like they were like quasi love interests too, like sort of like it wasn't like super overt, but it was like it was like hinted at, and like you know what I mean. Like it wasn't like yeah, it was just very different for that time period. You know, like it was very progressive. I thought.
So, it's interesting you say that. And because I was thinking about this, because it definitely feels, there definitely seems to be, certainly a closeness between the two characters. And I think you early on in the movie, you assume that they'll head into romantic territory at some point, and they don't, right? We get a hug at the end, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so now I wonder, on the one hand, to your point, maybe that was a progressive choice to show, a healthy platonic relationship between a man and a woman, which typically you don't see. Alternatively, I don't know if, maybe an interracial relationship they felt was, I don't know, taboo at the time to present on screen. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think it was more of like this is a movie for like 10-year-old boys, and like we don't want to bog it down with romance. Like I think that's more of what it was. Like I really think it was more just like this is definitely not like we don't want to waste the audience's time with like stuff that our target demographic isn't going to care about. Like I think that was kind of what it was more than anything. The fact that it was cropped, but like I definitely felt like there was like something there. You know what I mean? Because they kept doing the finger thing and
Yeah.
stuff. You know, like I don't know. Like it was just yeah. There
We,
was
we might have to explain that, because if anyone hasn't seen the movie and we say that they were just doing the finger thing, that might be
oh
a
yeah,
little
God, you're
confusing.
right. Yeah, no. When you want to explain the like Shaq and Sparks, that like when she's in the hospital bed, she like puts her like index finger up, then he touches her index, like almost like ET kind of, but
Yeah.
it's like yeah.
And then, casting wise, right? So we talked about, Uncle Joe, that actor, had been Shaft, and we talked about, Judd Nelson I don't know that I didn't remember that he was in this movie. So that was, I
I
remember.
okay. I had the action figure for Steel. Obviously, like three different Steels from the movie. I had a Judd Nelson character figure, and I had a Sparks figure.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I had the whole set. Like they're at KB, they were like on like blowout clearance, like one Easter for like 99 cents, and like I got like the entire set of them. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And then, the actor who plays Martin, and it's his cousin, right? Right?
Oh
Is that
yeah,
his
yeah,
little
his cousin.
cousin?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Ray J of the infamous Kim Kardashian video. That's Ray
Oh.
J as a kid in this movie. As I saw his name in the credits, I was like, that guy? And then I was like, who is he in the movie? And then I was like, well, this was quite some time
That's
ago. So yeah, he
crazy.
was the teenager. I'm
That's
trying to,
crazy.
I don't know that there was anyone else. I'm trying to think in the cast wise who really stood out. I think those were kind
Oh,
of the,
his sergeant. I feel like is someone I've seen in a lot of movies. His commanding officer
yeah.
in the military. Like I've seen that guy in like tons of movies. I don't know like famous if it was anything like but if you Googled it, you definitely recognize the guy. Like from sitcoms and stuff. I feel like he's probably in How I Met Your Mother or something.
Also one other thing, going back to what I was saying before about, kind of the grounded feel of the movie, uh, with the exception, I think, of the lasers,
Mhm.
everything looked like it was done practically as far as
True.
effects.
True. Sometimes to the detriment, and I think that the fight scenes could have been better. That's the thing. Like when you first see Steel, his reveal in the suit, he kind of just like walks around a corner. It's not this like really cool reveal. It's like, and he looks good in the suit, so it's like they could have made it better. But like, I feel like maybe budget combined with the fact that you were saying they couldn't get a stuntman for Shaq, that like might have been why the fights aren't like great. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, no, that's true. And I mean, he had a basketball career to protect. It's like you can't go too crazy
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I don't know. There was, again, the effects wise and story wise, it definitely had its limitations. But yeah, there was something. Look, CGI is great. It's wonderful. It can accomplish a lot. But sometimes you watch these movies and it's just so much of that, especially when we get to the big final battles. It's all CGI. So
Hmm.
there was something very quaint but refreshing about watching this and seeing all of these, practical explosions and fist fights and, the foot chase through the train yard. It's
That was
like,
cool.
yeah,
That was cool, and it was a unique, like that was like a cool, unique set piece too. I thought because it's something we've never seen like in another superhero movie that I can think of. Like what? So what's happening is it's late at night and there's a what would you even call it? Like a train yard where they said they're switching cars. The guy yells at Shaq's chasing a gang member who's like running from the robbery, and Shaq's chasing him down. He runs into a train yard, and there's a guy that's working there saying, "Hey, you're gonna get yourself killed. We're switching trains tonight." And the gang member just kind of like knocks him over, and like Shaq then runs and helps him. But like he proceeds to chase the kid through this like train yard where like the cars are like coupling with each other, and like Shaq has to like basically like maneuver his way through the trains as they're moving. And so like I thought it was a very cool set piece.
Me too. This was, I don't know. All in all, I mean, I was pretty high on the movie coming into this, but even more so now as we're talking about it. I'm really, I don't know. I'm glad that I rewatched it because I really had this view of it as this unfortunate unfortunate footnote in the DC movie library. And I think again, going into it now with very low expectations, but also, again, I keep coming back to this. I think a lot of the things that people knocked it for in the past and maybe even still would knock it for now, I just found kind of cool because they were a change of pace. Again, the practical effects and I don't know, and some of the cheesiness and stuff. It's like it very much feels like a product of its time, but it feels, I don't know, I guess if I have a complaint about a lot of the current crop of movies, especially the Marvel movies, and I don't want to overgeneralize, and I know some of the movies have done their own thing a little bit more, but it's a lot of that. I don't want to say that they're formulaic, although they are, but I mean, like a lot of them just kind of feel the same to me. And if they don't to you, great. But they do kind of. So I feel like watching something like this, it's like, this doesn't feel like a Marvel movie. And I like that. Like it was really cool to see something different.
I'm sure your longtime listeners are probably scratching their heads being like, you guys didn't like Superman 2, but you like this? Like, what's wrong with you? But like, I was actually thinking about this going into it because like, I was totally prepared to just like rave about this movie, and I knew that people didn't like it. And like, I think for me, the difference is that has Superman 2 been the first Superman movie, I would have held it in like way higher regard. But the fact that Superman 1 came out and was so earnest and so good and like so like well done to me compared to that second one is why I think I was so critical of it. And whereas like again, like Steel is like it's of a different time period, which again Superman 2 is too, but like it felt more earnest to me in some ways, which is really weird to say. Like specifically, like not the Donner cut, not talking about the Donner cut, I'm talking about the theatrical Lester cut. Like there's just so much like goofy stuff for goofiness sake, whereas like Steel, like the stuff that comes off as goofy is more like because of limitations of like budget and effects, as opposed to like we're trying to make something like ridiculous, And like I feel like that to me is where like the intent comes from. Like to me, like it's very clear that like the people making this movie were trying to make something really cool. Whereas like Richard Lester, I think was just, again, I don't know the guy, but like based off how great the first Superman movie was to then how like weird the second one was, is like I don't know, like I just didn't feel that love, So that's probably where my if I was going to defend my opinions on this, is where I would come down on it with.
It's funny because I wasn't even thinking about Superman 2, but I'm glad you brought that up. And that's true. There might be people who are like, I can't believe these two. It's like they had all these criticisms of Superman 2 and they're singing the praises of Steel. Like, what's the matter with them? But I agree with what you said totally. And I also would say from my own perspective, I think, with Superman 2, I really had some fundamental issues with the treatment of the character of Superman at his core. I mean, this idea that, and again, not to rehash that whole discussion that we had, but this idea that he couldn't be Superman and pursue a relationship, that he had to choose, and that he makes the choice as quickly as he does and then instantly regrets it and can't function as Clark because in this version of the story, Clark is basically meaningless. It's just this persona that he adopts to preserve his identity. So I think that's the thing. It's just there were certain aspects of Superman 2 in particular that I just have a hard time accepting as a Superman fan, like just at its core. Whereas here, it's like, yeah, there were some goofy things in the execution, but like we've been saying, I really think it did tap into the core of the
Of
John
Steel.
Henry Irons
Yeah.
character.
Of
That
him being like
basic,
a good, solid dude. Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I think I am more forgiving of, I'll smoke
Yeah.
you like a blunt and like all that
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
stuff.
We'll be dipped in shit and rolled in breadcrumbs. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah. And
it got
also,
the
like,
character.
also, John Henry Irons is like a totally selfless character in this movie. Like, he does nothing out of like self-interest or self-preservation. Everything he does is for other people. And I feel like that's a very, as a kid, that was like such a powerful message to me. You know what I mean? Like, and going into like the comic book, like they come close to it in the movie, but like in the comic book specifically, the family says to him that like he's putting on his new suit at the very end of issue 1. He's putting on his new suit, and the grandma is coming down the stairs, and she's holding like a cape in her arms, and she says to him, she's like, "Where's the S?" And he's like, "Superman inspired," something to the effect of, "Superman inspired me, and I'm gonna fight for truth and justice, but my fight might have to go outside the law to take down these guns." And his grandma puts the cape on him, and she's like, "That may be so, but you're always going to be the black Superman to us." And like that, dude, I'm getting teared up just hearing it right now. Like, as a kid, as like a middle class suburban white kid in the '90s, that shit moved me, man. That was like it told me that like you don't need the powers to be Superman. You know what I mean? And it was like, it's not the power. What I've always said about Superman is like, it's not the powers that make him Superman. It's his good values. And John Henry Irons has that in spades, and that is what makes him Superman. And like the fact that like they kind of touch on that in the movie, like, because they can't really talk about Superman that much, but like it's such a, I feel like now in today's day and age, it's such a powerful character to have. Like, I kind of scratched my head as to why he's not utilized more. Like, why he doesn't have a main series, why they don't have a movie in development with him, or TV. I mean, I know he's on Superman and Lois, but like I don't know. I just think he's like so relevant, and so like he was back then and he is now. Like, I just think he's such a great character for that.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's really interesting to talk about listening to you talk about being moved in that way, and again, we're two white guys here talking about this, but I mean, imagine if you were a young black kid at that time, not having a ton of characters who again, this idea of representation and seeing yourself reflected in the characters you're reading or watching, you didn't have a ton of that. I mean, thankfully more now. But to have a character like Steel, I'm sure was impactful for for a lot of kids who saw themselves in Steel. It was, and again, it was impactful for us, even though
Yeah.
that aspect wasn't there. But so I think there's really something to be said for that. And I think as you were saying that, it sparked this. I think that when we're always talking about Superman and why the character resonates with us, and it's that choice to use the powers the way he does, and that, again, that inherent goodness that he does it because of the values he was raised with and all of that. And hand in hand with that is this idea of hope, right? The hope that he inspires. And I think why probably you and I in particular and other people like gravitate towards Steel so much is because Steel is the idea of that hope and inspiration fully realized. Like, Superman
Mm-hmm.
inspired someone to take up this mantle and become this character, this super, this vigilante, in such a direct way. So it's like, it's the hope, it's the inspiration, and it's like, okay, now you actually get to see that play out. Like, this is someone who was inspired to go do
Yeah.
something.
Well, I mean, Steel, like, in many ways, if you look at it that way, Steel's like us. Like, he is like, he's
Yeah.
a guy. He's like literally like a regular guy, has no superpowers, wasn't born with anything like particularly like. I mean, yeah, he's like physically like he's like jacked and like strong and everything, but he's not an alien. He wasn't given a Green Lantern ring. He wasn't struck by lightning. He's like a guy who was smart enough to create a suit and like just like through like just sheer force of will and like goodness, like make a positive impact on the world around him. And like I think like, and again, like what you're saying is like he's like us, someone who looked up to Superman, who like then made their life, they turned themselves into Superman, like through like good values. And like I think it's such a, it bums me out that he's overlooked as much as he is, because like even when we were talking a couple of years ago at that convention when you were mentioned at the beginning of the show with Brandon, like Brandon made a comment like, "Oh, I don't really know if there's much to talk about Steel past 6 issues." And I'm like, I totally disagree. I think you could have a super long running series of Steel. I think there's tons of stuff to mine with this character. And like, and in recent years, I've seen in I've seen some takes with him like in the New 52 and stuff where like they almost kind of like approach him like a Reed Richards, like this like crazy super smart guy inventor, and like I don't like that either. Like I like him as like smart enough to create the weapons, but like keep him in like the realm of reality. You know what I mean? Like I don't want him making like time machines and shit. I want him like in the suit of armor fighting like corrupt like businessmen and gang members and protecting his neighborhood. And I think that's so like that is still so relevant today. You know, like I think that the core of who he is still super powerful and relevant. And I think there's so much more you can say with him.
Dude, 1,000%. So with respect to him being underutilized, yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about this, especially, hot on the heels of Reign of the Supermen, revisiting that. And, you know, even just with thinking of those four characters who were introduced in that storyline, Steel is the only one who has been around consistently, right? Like even Superboy died in Infinite Crisis. He came back, then he was gone for New 52. Then, he returned,
Yeah.
so they've gone, they've died, they've come back, they've been erased from continuity. They've come back. Steel has always been there, but for long stretches really has just been kind of on the back burner. Again, he had this one solo series. I know he's had a special here and there. And, during the Jeff Loeb, Joe Kelly era of the Superman books that I talked about on the show like a year ago, Mark Schultz and Man of Steel utilized Steel a good bit. And that was cool. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential, but I'm with you. I don't love, I think it's the difference between him in the lab versus him in the junkyard in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't need to be a junkyard, but I like the idea of him more as a man of the people, like street level, actually interacting with the world and the neighborhood, because that's the thing. And yes, there are Superman stories that do, kind of have Superman operating in that arena as well. And look, I'm coming off of reading the early 90s. The books did a great job of, having Superman interact with all these different pockets of Metropolis. But, at the end of the day, when there's a big Superman storyline, it's almost always going to be, one of the big villains, a big battle, stuff like that. But with Steel, like Steel is that street level, like grounded character. And you want him interacting with his family. You want him interacting with the kids in the neighborhood. And I don't want to lose that. So I agree with you. I think if they position him too much, a la Reed Richards, like you said, and I think that's an apt comparison. I think that loses something. I mean, it's like at least he's there.
I also want him to stay a man of action too. Like I like to me, like I like him when he's fighting with the hammer and like fighting bad guys, like, so I remember in the New 52, I don't remember it super specifically, but like their take at the beginning of the New 52 is like Steel was almost going to be like a relief worker. Like he would go to like places where like like a tsunami like hit, and he'd bring like supplies and stuff, and like that's what he was using the super. And like in the real world, that's super heroic and noble, but as a comic book superhero character based in like action adventures, like I want him fighting bad guys with his hammer. You know what I mean? Like I like it was almost like a push to make him like almost like a real world character, where it's like again, like I just like I want him still being like an action based, like, because I feel like if you make him too cerebral, you get away from like the Steel part if you just make him a scientist, right? And like that, especially in comic books, loses so much visual like energy and momentum. You know what I mean? Like, so like, yeah, I don't know. I just thought this 90s series was perfect. Like, yeah, if DC ever wanted to reboot it and they needed an artist to draw like the new Steel, I'm there.
I would love to see you do that. Was there anything else from the comic that we read that stood out to you that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like the whole like tar thing. Like I remember that being in the comic. It was like one gang had the weapons that he designed, the other gang had this stuff called tar. That was a drug that turned them into like Hulk kind of characters. Mm-hmm. So I remembered in the subsequent issues some cool fights with Steel fighting like basically Hulks. Yeah, was there anything that popped out to you?
So one thing we pretty much already said, but that how closely the movie stuck to the comic. I mean, the first issue of the comic starts with him getting off the bus in DC from Metropolis, and he's like walking through the neighborhood and reconnecting with his family, and then seeing these, guns on the streets. Here we get Natasha, who, would continue, his niece, who would continue to play a long role in the comics and would become her own version of Steel.
Steel, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, so that was cool again, just to see. And again, I rewatched the movie first before the comic, but it was cool to see, to see those parallels. But I think my favorite scene though from the comic was when he's having dinner with his family, and I think the grandfather makes reference to him being Steel. He's like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Well, of course we know it's you."
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. And especially going back to the movie too, when the grandmother sees the news footage and it's like this 7 foot tall, black man who's very polite. And it's like, of course, like who else could it possibly, I mean, especially in the movie with Shaq, it's like mask or no mask. It's like, who else?
Yeah. It's Shaq for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of it from the comic, but I enjoyed it. I mean, I'll be honest. I've been sort of on the fence as far as, would I do a full read through of that 50 issue series for the podcast? Mm-hmm. I was kind of like, I don't know. I'm leaning much more toward it now after what we've just gone through. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I'd commit to going through all 50 of them, but like, I definitely am interested to keep going. You know what I mean? Like for as long as, like the series, like is like, holding my interest and stuff. I mean, I'm pretty bad nowadays. Like my, it's so hard for me to like get time to like read not get time is the wrong word. It's like I'm so tired that I work in comics all day that like it's almost hard for me to like read comics now. But yeah, like I'm definitely into like reading this book again, and the fact they're all in Comixology, like I definitely think I'm gonna like buy like the next like 6 of them and just see how it goes, and like see if like I mean I friggin' love Steel, so yeah, man, I just want there to be more of it. Like something I want to ask you was if they were gonna reboot this character for a movie, like if they were gonna do a Steel movie, like who do you think could be Steel? Like because like talking about Shaq, like I was saying, like I don't know if there's like a modern equivalent. Like I feel like The Rock is like the closest, but he's like already Black Adam, so he can't be Steel,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I really do like who they have on Superman and Lois, but yeah, I mean, if we're talking about a different version for the movie, I would have to think about that. But just to pick up on what you were saying about, maybe you would want to read more and such. This is my prediction. I think what's going to happen is you're going to finish the first season of Superman and Lois. Okay. And then you're going to text me and you're going to be like, I want to do another episode on Steel and I want to talk about Superman and Lois, and I'll read however many issues you want to read. But I really just have this suspicion that's the text I'm going to get at some point once you're done watching. And I'm game to do it. And I'm going to be like, yes, let's do it. Cause, I love the show's treatment of him and I'm intrigued by this comic series. So Louise Simonson wrote the first 30. And then there were a few fill-in issues, and then Priest wrote the remainder of the series. So there is actually a decent, kind of break point if we wanted to. But in any event, as far as a movie, I don't know. But I actually had a movie-related question for you. I don't think there's any chance of it happening, but we do have this multiverse Flash movie coming up. Mm-hmm. I mean, how cool would it be if we got a Shaq appearance?
Shaq? Oh my God, dude! I would lose my shit if Shaq showed up. Like, oh, dude, would you want him in the '97 suit, or would you want them to like try to make the suit more like the comic book, like with the full face mask and the cape and everything?
I think, what I think they should upgrade if they even put it again. I don't think this is happening at all. But like, I don't think they're gonna put him in, for argument's sake. Like let's say he shows up in this and they put him in a costume. No, let them upgrade I would go for a costume upgrade. What about you?
Okay. Yeah. I would just, more than anything, I just want the cape. Like I know the full face mask in the comics looks great, but I don't know how you would translate that in real life. Because like in the comics, like his face moves too. It's like it's not like right. It's like Batman Beyond where like the mouth and eyes and stuff move. So like I don't know how you would translate that to like reality, like an iron mask that like moves the lips and everything. But like, yeah, dude, I would just love to see him with the cape and the hammer. Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
that's what I would want.
again, I don't think, for the filmmakers of this movie, the producers for Warner Brothers, I'm sure they made their list of like, okay, what would fans want to see? What will serve the story we're telling? Who can we get? And I don't think the Steel movie would probably be on anyone's list, but
I think Shaq would do it in a heartbeat.
he would totally do it.
Yeah.
He would for sure, but I don't know that they would recognize any value in that, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, it's like, you look at the Crisis TV event, and obviously there were some characters who really got a lot of play, who they pulled in from other versions, but then there were some who were just there and gone quickly. So with Shaq, you just be like a quick little 30-second thing. I don't know if there were ever an opportunity for it. It's this.
If it was Shaq like holding his helmet in his hand, and he had the cape on, and he had like the hammer over his back, like holding with his over his back, and he like had like a quick line of dialogue, just in that pose, like that would like make my fucking decade, dude. That would be so dope. Like,
yeah. Well, do you remember on in the Arrowverse, not Crisis, but the year before when they did Elseworlds, and as Barry and Oliver were jumping through the portal to get to Kara's Earth, and they go to Smallville and they play "Save Me" by Remy Zero, the Smallville theme song?
I don't remember that. I don't think I saw that.
Oh, you will like that. If nothing else, I think you'll enjoy. But that moment when all of a sudden you heard that music start, it was like, oh my God, it's Smallville. If in this Flash movie you get a few seconds of that Steel theme,
oh yeah, dude, that'd be so dope. Yeah.
Though it's funny because, again, you and I recognize like that's a very slim chance, but I feel like so much of this stuff, it comes down to what affection the filmmakers have for the stuff that they might have grown up watching. So it's like, I don't know, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. Like if someone involved was like, hey, that Steel movie was actually pretty good, like let's throw Shaq in there.
That's true. I mean, the director, I don't know how old he is. I feel like if he's like around our age, there's a strong possibility that Steel might show up. If he's older than us by like 5 years, he probably thinks the movie was like garbage and doesn't want to like watch it. So doesn't want to incorporate it. So I think it all depends on how old that director is and how old he was when Steel came out,
Yeah. Well, in any event, there's a lot of untapped potential with Steel. And I think the fact that, he's stuck around is great. But I feel like, unfortunately, more often than not, he's just kind of there, right? And he's this utility player that they can kind of use when they need some backup for Superman. And, like, that's fine. He's a great ally to Superman, and I like that role. But, there needs to be more. And I think there's so much potential there. And that's the other thing, too. Watching the movie and the comic, too. I mean, you're dealing with, city life and gang violence and weapons on the street in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. The military industrial complex and like who's profiting off of all of this. There are a lot of issues to mine here that are still relevant. I mean, I feel like someone really needs to like look alive here because there's perfect material right here.
Yeah. And the fact that like he's part of the Superman family, but he feels so different, like in terms of like the world that he's dealing with. Like he doesn't really like, to my knowledge, doesn't really fight like aliens like Parasite and Lobo that much. You know what I mean? Like the world he exists in is such a different flavor from like Superman's that like I feel like it adds like a unique kind of like diversity to the DC line, and like I really want them to like focus to realize the potential of this. Like I know that Michael B. Jordan is doing the Superman movie, right, with J.J. Abrams, right? And like, it probably won't be, but how awesome would it be if it turns out to be a Steel movie? Like, how friggin' awesome would that be? Like, I mean, it probably won't be. It'll probably be like their own take on Superman, but like, I just feel like there's a lot to mine here, like you said. It's like, and it's really good, powerful shit,
And it's funny too because Iron Man, right, became so popular, and Steel is the DC's closest equivalent. So you would think, and again, this should not be, I mean, generally speaking, this I don't think is a good motivation, right? A studio shouldn't just be looking to copy, right? They should be trying to go in their own direction, but that's not often what happens, right? More often than not, they see what was successful elsewhere and they try to replicate it. And it's like, You've got the perfect equivalent here. It's just shocking to me that there hasn't been
Yeah,
more done.
yeah. It's funny because it's like I feel like Steel. He's got like the heart and the personality and the goodness of Superman, but like the cool wish fulfillment aspect of like putting on a suit of armor like Iron Man and like flying around and like doing like all that cool. Like it's like I feel like it's like kind of like the best of both worlds. It's like a little bit of like both, you know. It's like you've got that inherent superhero kind of like iconic flavor mixed with that like kind of like edgy Iron Man like tech like hardware thing going on, you know? Like I don't know, I just it's definitely a gold mine for sure that if someone, you know, some producer just hopefully there's producers that listen to your show and they hear us talking about it and they're like, you know what, that's a good idea. Like I'm gonna greenlight this.
That would be great. I don't know. I also doubt Shaq would ever come across Shaq's podcast menu. But if Shaq
He
ever
might
listens,
do. Shaq might be a listener, man. He likes Superman. You
that's
never
true.
know.
When I put this out, I'll tweet him and I'll be just
You
be
should
like,
tag him in
look,
it.
like we really enjoyed this movie. We went almost 2 hours singing the praises of this
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
But maybe the last thing is that we've talked so much about Steel and Steel's place in the Superman mythology and how large Superman looms in John Henry deciding to do this. But then there's also John Henry, the folk hero. So there's also that aspect of the mythology that Steel draws from as well. This man who went up against the machine and beat the machine. Again, there's a lot of stuff there that can be explored.
Speaking of that, one of my favorite incarnations of Steel is from the New Frontier. This is kind of like a segue off of this, but in the New Frontier, it's a book that takes place by Darwin Cook and it takes place in the 60s, right? Like that's when that book takes place. The
I think it's
1960s.
like the 50s into the 60s, I think is
Yeah.
the general
Okay.
time frame.
Yeah, it's like the 1950s going into the 60s, and like there's a character in there called John Henry who is like, how would you describe him? He's like it's in the South where there's segregation, and he's got like a hammer. I'm trying to remember, but he's like, isn't he trying to like escape the South? That's the thing.
Yeah, so New
It's
Frontier
so long.
is my favorite comic book story, like all time. And
Oh
yet
wow.
it's been a while since I've read it, and I wish I had
Yeah.
these details right off the top of my head. But if I'm not mistaken, was the character not did he escape a lynching and then he
Yes.
became a vigilante?
Yes, because he had the hood on with the
Yes.
noose, right? Yeah, and then eventually he dies, right, in that book. And this is where like it was became so like powerful to me because like he dies and then the epilogue to that story is you see a kid reading about it in the newspaper and he's wearing a football jersey that says Irons on the back of it, and I'm like, holy shit, that's John Henry Irons reading about the John Henry, like this like guy who was kind of like a John Henry, like modern day John Henry. Like it just kind of like it was really like it was really interesting how Darwin Cook flowed it. You know what I mean? Into like to the modern John Henry Irons. You know, it was yeah, it was
That was
good.
really cool, and I appreciated that, especially because the period of time Cook was working with. He was depicting the transition from the golden to the silver age, right? And of course,
Mm-hmm.
the character of Steel doesn't show up until the '90s. So like he made a conscious choice to incorporate that
Mm-hmm.
character into that story, and I thought that was really cool. I like that too a lot. Which was neat.
Yeah.
The animated movie I think cuts out basically all of it, but I think in the ending montage, I think you do see the kid Irons reading a comic, I think, or reading a story
Yeah,
about something like that, I think.
yeah. I think they cut out the John Henry character though, because I think for like it's like really dark stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like horrible dark stuff, and I don't think they wanted that in like a kids movie. So, um, but but yeah, but still, man, like again, like if they could reboot it, like do you have any like wish actor if you could have anybody?
I mean, to be honest, Michael B. Jordan would probably be at the top of my list. I mean, I've been a
He
fan
would
of
be
him
good.
from The Wire, Friday Night
Friday
Lights. I mean,
Night Lights,
of
yeah,
course, now he's in everything, but even before that, I've long been a
dude.
fan of his.
When he was in Friday Night Lights, I remember talking to my roommates. I'm like, this guy would be a great steal. Like I remember thinking that back then. Like this, so yeah, Michael B. Jordan would be awesome.
But well, yeah, what
The
about you? Who
guy
do you have in mind?
Well, I mean, The Rock obviously is like who the first one comes to mind. Not only because he's big, but also because he's like that's like genuine, like good-hearted. Like he comes across as very like likable and friendly and polite and everything. So he's got that like warmness that I want Steel to have. I feel like Idris Elba's too old, but I feel like at one point he would have been good. You know what I mean? Like if in like 2003, 2004, he would have been awesome. And then the guy, did you ever watch Bridgerton? This on Netflix.
No.
The main actor on Bridgerton, I mean, he'd have to take like the WB horse steroid regimen that they put all their actors on to get like massive because he's like kind of skinny. But he's a really good actor too. I think he would be. I think his name is Reggie John Pierre. I think he's
Okay.
French. I'm not. I can't remember his name, but it's something. Roger John Bridgerton, the main guy in Bridgerton. I think he'd be good.
Bridgerton guy, we got you.
Yeah. But then other than that, I don't know. Maybe like an unknown, you know, or again too old. But did you ever watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Sure did.
Terry Crews, he probably would have been good at one point. I mean, he's too old now, you know. But
Yeah, I do like. Yeah, I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
yeah,
and I love Terry Crews. Yeah, they're. Yeah, I mean the thing with an unknown that definitely could work. I feel like putting our like executive hat on. It's like they would probably go with someone more known because the character isn't as well known, right? So it's like at
yeah,
least then you would have
yeah,
some star power because the name Steel might not get people so excited. But
yeah.
yeah,
Hey, you could go LeBron James because he's in movies now. You can
it's
follow
true.
in the NBA footsteps and have LeBron James do it. I mean, I think he'd be great. Like he definitely would have the presence for it for sure.
It's yeah, or or you revive this story and you bring Shaq back and it's just we pick up with John Henry years later.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, that could work too. Yeah. I mean, he's too old too. I mean, I feel like you need someone relatively young for these movies, just from like a practicality standpoint, of like
Yeah.
doing the stunts and everything.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's someone out there, whether one of the names we threw out or someone else. But yeah, hopefully
And
we see there's more of a comeback for the character.
I also want to be clear. That's not me being ageist because I feel like I'm too old to be one of these characters. Like I feel like I wake up every day like, oh, I'm creaking in pain. Like I can only imagine like if you're 50 and asked to put on a suit of armor and run around and like fight people, it's like not happening. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know I have numerous clicks like all day,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
like no, I get it. Listen, man, this has been beyond fun. Is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off?
No, just thanks again for having me. And if anyone out there is even quasi interested in Steel after hearing us talk about it, read the 1994 series and check out the movie for sure.
Right on. And for anyone who wants to follow you, where's the best place to do that?
Instagram is at V Ken Marion and Twitter is at VK Marion.
Very nice. So I hope people will do that because you post so much awesome art all the time. So hopefully people will
Thanks,
follow
man.
you and check all that out and check out what you're doing in comics. I know you're working on a new project that I know you've been posting art for, Death Shroud, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. In the middle of that right now. It's going really good. It's gonna be super cool. Should be dropping next year sometime, but I'm not quite sure about that. We don't have that all ironed out yet. But yeah, check out my page for posts. The costume is really cool. It's very complicated, so it's taking a while to draw, but it's a really cool design character, and yeah, it's gonna be super rad. So if you guys like action-packed comic books, keep an eye out for Death Shroud coming your way. It's gonna be
Nice.
awesome.
Very nice. Well, this is great. I think the last time it's been a while since you were on the show. I mean, I think it was, I don't know, like
Snyder Cut, I think.
April or something since because
Yeah.
we did our Smallville, our top 10
Was that
Smallville
after
count.
Snyder Cut?
I think so. I'd have to double check, but in any event, it's been months.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah.
So it's really good to get you back, and I don't think it'll be too long before you're back again. So I hope everyone will come back when you do, and also keep tuning in to upcoming episodes. Like I said, in 2 weeks, Justin DeVoe is coming back, and we're going to be talking about the DC Injustice animated movie. And actually, next week. So before Injustice, next week, we have a special bonus episode, a Batman-centric installment, where we'll be looking at the Batman Long Halloween saga. So right? Just in time for
Very cool.
Halloween. It'll be great. So that's what's coming up over the next couple of weeks. Thank you, as always, for checking out the show. Thank you, Ken, for taking part. And keep tuning in. Until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Greg Schiegel. Music by Basic Printer. Join the conversation by becoming part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. Follow Digging for Kryptonite on Instagram and Twitter, and visit flatsquirrelproductions.com to explore more of my film and podcast projects.